Hello, everybody. Khoi is my first ever face-to-face podcast guest. He's a founder of ConvoyOP, but Khoi is also an immigrant, me from Mexico, and he's from Vietnam, both of us brought to the U.S. as children. His journey is the silent story of millions. He speaks to us today. Enjoy this amazing human and how with light he overcame. There's always light. This is Khoi. Enjoy, everybody. Let's talk about where you come from. Okay, I come from Mexico. I've been really upfront with you. I came here as an immigrant. You come from Vietnam. So I'm just going to ask you detailed questions. And I don't know if you got a chance to talk to your parents. Like, I'm getting all excited.
I did. I actually called my mom and dad yesterday just so I could get, like all the little details. Because I was super young when we came over here. I heard parts of the story here and there, but I did verify yesterday. So in case you stumped me with some questions here.
Hey, Khoi, why do you think, you just asked them yesterday. So, and I just asked my mom 2 or 3 years ago also. It took me decades to ask them about, why did they decide to come? What was it that pushed them to immigrate? And those were hard questions. You wouldn't dare ask that as a child to your parent. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think part of it is maturity, you're trying to figure out who you are, and you're trying to make something of yourself or do something in the world, and you're so busy trying to do those things that you're not really listening to the past and your history. I recently started learning more Vietnamese to speak it, and that means that I started really becoming interested in my history.
So how is it that somebody from Vietnam ends up coming here? And do you know that the details of that? I know it's a boat, but what were the details what are the details that you know? By the way, you were only 3 years old.
Yes. So super young. I really didn't have much memory at all. Sometimes I feel like those were memories that were prompted, and they told me the story and I think I remember it, but multiple families put together some money to be able to buy this, I think it's a trolling boat. It wasn't a fishing boat. They said it was a used trolling boat in the darkness of the night to try to hide. During that time, they told me that the people that I guess were the captains of the boat, they got to go for free because they knew how to guide the ship to the location. But there were people as we were departing, they were saying that some families that paid got pushed off, and other families that didn't pay actually jumped on the boat and they just had to go, But that was the first part of it. And then we went to Indonesia. They were saying that as we were approaching, they didn't know where to go. At that point, we were actually out of food, out of water, and it was nighttime. My mom was saying that they felt that we probably would have died if we were out there much longer, so they got desperate and they saw I guess a light, and it was an oil tanker that was, off the coast. And so they just said, look, let's just go toward that, because it's the only thing that we can see right now. So that's what they did. And they went to this oil tanker. They ended up picking us up. They said that they saw the boat was in such bad condition that they just sank it. They actually let us on the oil tanker, and then they just let it sink. I don't remember seeing it sink. My brother says he kind of remembers it, but, they said that was essentially what happened. And so we got on the tanker, they fed us, and then they took us to the refugee camp.
So as you were talking, Khoi, you mentioned two things that completely gave me chills. And one of them was you said, well, everything was in the dark. Everything's always in the night because we're hiding. You said there was a light and we followed the light. And the light came in the form of that oil tanker. That is so beautiful because I think with, in my story, my mom, she crossed by foot at the border and her light was a car. She was told, look for the light. Anyways, always a light.
Yeah, that's really great that you pointed that out. It's a symbol, it's something that you look for, and it really was a salvation, it really helped us.
So you said you were with your brother. Were you with other siblings?
Yeah, so three boys. I'm the youngest of them. So
Mm.
it was my dad, my mom, and my two brothers, older brothers.
And from Indonesia, where did you go from there?
You know, they said that we stayed there for a little over a year. They were being taught, you know, very little, but like just being taught like what to do when you're in America. Basically, like get your life set up. They did feed us. We couldn't work. We didn't really know anything. So mostly it was just them learning these lessons and learning how to do stuff when they get to America. You know, people that were going to the U.S. had to go to one place, and then people that were going to like other places like Canada or, you know, somewhere else went to a different island. So we ended up in the island that was going to the U.S.
Did you know anybody in the U.S. at the time, or is this something that you picked?
Yes, my uncle, two of them actually came in 75, and I don't know the exact details of this, but my uncle was working with the US or something to that nature. When they left, he got to go with them. So one of them was there in America, and he had basically started his life. So he ended up actually sponsoring us. So
Mm.
when we came, we actually ended up with him for a while.
Okay, yeah, because I've heard that there was two or three different ways that you would be allowed to leave, right? One
Right.
of them was with a sponsor, and I think one is with marriage. That's the case, right?
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, for us particularly, it was a sponsor, and you know, it's because you know he had some ties with working with the U.S. My mom also said that she did some accounting for the U.S. as well, and so she worked with them, and I think that at least gave her a kind of an edge. They put us on a boat to Singapore, and we stayed in Singapore for a month, and from there we then were flown to California, which is where my uncle picked us up.
Southern California?
Yeah, it was Fullerton, actually. That was our first apartment that he helped us get. I remember trick-or-treating there. I remember like running around the neighborhood and things like that, but very little of it. I remember some things. I actually went back to it. Yeah, I was like, I remember Fullerton for some reason. And I drove around. I went there when I was like, I don't know, in my 20s or something.
Of course, that's your roots in the United States. How
Yeah.
long were you in that apartment?
Well, so we first came, we stayed with my uncle, and he then taught my parents a lot of the stuff. I mean, I don't remember how long, but it maybe like a year, 2 years, maybe three, you know, not a long time. My brothers did go to school. Yeah, and I was still at home, and I don't remember when we moved, but you know, we moved actually quite a bit.
We all need guides, somebody that shows us the rope. And it seems like this is the uncle that taught you that.
He really showed us everything we needed to know. And he's on my mom's side. He's my mom's younger brother. Super smart guy. And, you know, he really helped us kind of get on our feet and showed them what they needed to do. And we still needed help.
So one thing I heard, Khoi, was that you got in trouble in high school?
It was actually middle school.
Middle school.
Uh, when I was thinking about it, I actually got in trouble when I was in elementary too.
You're a rebel.
No, not even, I don't know okay, I'll tell you what happened.
Tell me.
It was the playground, and they had like these temporary, I guess, like expansion buildings. And I walked in between one, right? Or two. I guess it was narrow.
Yeah.
And the teacher was like, what if there was an earthquake? And then she sent me home with a letter for my parents to sign. I didn't know. I had no idea. But I, it's kind of embarrassing, but I took the paper and I folded it. I'm like, hey, parents, sign this. And they're like, what's on top? And I'm like, there's nothing there. But, you know, obviously they read it and they're like, don't do that. I'm like, I know. And they signed it.
You're trying to get one over on your parents.
Yeah, that wasn't happening.
Teachers are extreme. And then you said you got in trouble again.
Yeah, so in middle school was a whole different thing. You know, this probably sounds typical, but one lunch period, one of my friends comes up behind me, right? I'm wearing my backpack, comes up behind me and he's like, hey, let me put something in your back. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. He brought something to school that he shouldn't have. And, you know, I guess he saw me as a way to hide it. And then so obviously people saw him give it to me. The principal asked me to come to the office and I'm like, okay. And then, you know, they found it and they're like, you're expelled. This was like my 8th grade year. I never ratted on him, by the way. I never said anything. It never even crossed my mind. I was just like, okay, whatever. Like, I'll just take it. I ended up going to this program called SOS. It was just like an acronym, and it was basically like from 8 to noon. And it was just like in the back of the school. We went around to the back gate. We got all of our lessons and everything, and we got to go home early. So it was actually not that bad, truthfully. I got to go home every day at noon.
But Khoi, it was where all the bad kids went.
It was, yeah. I was with the bad kids, and it was fun. I mean, I didn't get to go to like the annual, like the eighth grade picnic is what they called it, and all that. And I missed out on like my, that year. But
Well, look, hey, don't feel bad. I ended up at a continuation school too for different reasons. And, I also went to school with the bad kids. And it's not, I always say it's not that we were bad. It's just that things were happening. Like the situation with you had nothing to do with you. And nobody, there was nobody asking us more detail. You didn't have to do that. The school was just like, it's easier just to kick them out.
yeah, it was. Even if it's like, hey, what did you do? Oh, it was somebody else's. It's like everybody's going to say that. They're not going to believe you anyway. So,
Right.
I mean, I'm sure I would have had fun at school too, but.
Yeah, no, I missed out on all that stuff. Look, I didn't go to any dances. I'm not even in the yearbook. And at the time, it's like, I guess this is what my life's going to be.
How old were you when that happened for you?
I was in high school.
That's even bigger.
Yeah, it was even bigger because, for me, it was not graduating. Like, I almost didn't graduate and I was already like behind in my school year. And I was behind for a lot of other like personal reasons, but I wasn't bad. But I also hang out with kids that maybe, that everybody thought were bad. The cholos or cholas. I mean, we all dressed a certain way, and it's not that we were bad. We just looked bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just part of that, like your heritage and just like, I mean, I did listen to your story and, I understand why you didn't have time. You were just so
Yeah.
busy working and just making life work for you, and your family.
Yeah, but even like when they kicked me out, Khoi, like when the principal told me like, look, you're getting kicked out for X reason, you're bad influence, like literally that's what was in my notes, like you're a bad influence. I actually believed I was one of the bad kids. There's actually a big Vietnamese community here as well, and we only learn what we see in the media or in TV, just like you would learn about like the Mexican story. Like I
Yeah.
didn't know about this Indonesia thing until now.
I heard the stories and I remember like, oh, we ended up on some islands and this and that, but I never actually got the names. And then
Yeah.
I looked it up. I looked it up on the map as I was talking to them, and I was like, and they were saying certain places, and I was looking it up to see
Yeah.
the distance of the travel and all that stuff. I mean, just the fact that like getting on a fishing boat with basically assuming that we're going to make it. Yeah. Assuming we're going to make it, assuming these people could actually navigate the waters and get us over there. And like, it's a long distance. It's crazy. I was like, I'm surprised we made that, it's just, I never knew. I never looked.
I mean, if here I am in California and from Mexico people are not making it, I can't even imagine from Vietnam all the way over here. Did you track the journey? Like, did you see how many miles it took?
I didn't look at the mileage. I should map it out, that would be interesting to know the mileage.
We were curious, so we did look it up. From Vietnam to Singapore by sea is 1,764 kilometers, or if you're in the US, 1,096 miles. To give you some perspective, that's like going in a boat from New York City all the way to Tampa, Florida, and then a 14 to 16 hour flight from Singapore all the way to California. Wheesh! Now you know. So back to the show.
Khoi, thank you so much for being so detailed with that journey from Vietnam to the United States and for being honest and upfront about just your situation in junior high. I mean, you're the owner of a company now. You are a guru in coding, I hear. Yeah?
I like coding. Sure. I like challenges. I've been able to solve some pretty challenging things, and yeah. So.
How did you get into that? How does somebody from Vietnam, who's an immigrant, who's had issues in school, get into, become this? How did you start?
Out of high school, my buddy and we started like a t-shirt company, And I'll give you the short version of this. I was like, hey, we need a website. So I started learning like HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And yeah, I taught myself. But then we also started offering website services because I was like, hey, we got to make money to make these shirts.
How old were you?
I mean, that was college. So probably like, I don't know, 20s.
People need to start before college, like as soon as possible, and come to the table with projects already done. You stood out from everybody else.
I did it not because I wanted to stand out. I just did it because like it interested me. You know, I was like, hey, I want to do this and I want to learn this stuff. And learning early is pretty important, but it's not really like critical. But I also feel like if you can decrease the time frame that it takes for you to learn certain things, so like learning how to learn more efficiently will also give you that advantage of having learned early. If you didn't learn early, but you learned quickly or learn how to learn quickly, you still can catch up and kind of do things faster.
Can you give me an example of learning quickly and cutting time?
You know, everybody's going to be different because some people, you know, learn by visually, some people learn by, you know, tactile, other people are auditory. For me, the way that I did it was, you know, a lot of times, especially for programming, I read through the table of contents. What that does for me, it tells me, hey, these are the things that are possible. But I won't actually go through like, hey, I got to do all these little like exercises and do these things, because that is at that point like actually executing some of these things. Sometimes you don't actually remember, and if the coder's listening, most of the time, like I don't actually remember the exact syntax for like doing a for loop or, you know, this or that. I always look those up, but I know they're possible. And so as long as you get, you know, kind of the framework of what's possible, then you can start like making that understanding in your head. Okay, as long as I know it's possible, I don't need to actually do that right now. So it speeds up your learning process to where then you could focus on the stuff that, you know, hey, well, I want to do this project that requires a database, or I want to do this project that requires, you know, ABC. I know they're possible. I know where to look. What that also does is you learn the rules of the system, but then you could actually say, well, if these things are possible, then you could kind of surmise that, hey, this other thing might be possible. But I always start from the point of everything is possible in programming. And then I just need to figure out which ways to do it to make it work. Check all the tools that you have. And then now you know what type of things you can do with those tools.
One of the reasons why we're talking is because I want to let everybody know what is possible. You know, there's methods of getting into technology companies. You have to follow 1, 2, 3, 4, like a list of organized methods to get into these tech companies. You started your own company. I went into tech indirectly. They're both fine. And we both ended up working with those people that actually, you know, did the thing, you know, and went to the standard colleges. But we all ended up in the same place. And so my point is, you're talking about what's possible. Had I known that you can go into these worlds and whatever works for you, like that's why we're talking. I mean, you know, we're talking about coming from a different country. We're talking about we think differently. You know, talking about getting kicked out of school. We still ended up okay. That's possible, even if you do have that kind of life.
If you start with the fact that, hey, it is possible to get to tech or get to, you know, this destination, then it's just about taking the steps between that to get from one to the other. We may feel overwhelmed because we see these things are so far apart. Kind of just solve those things that are in front of you.
I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in the tech industry, almost 700,000 jobs out there that are not filled. You know, people like you and me, if we were 13, we would never think that these worlds would be for us. What advice would you give young Khoi in junior high who was sent to the back of the school to learn? Like if somebody said, you can be a CEO of a company and learn programming and all this, would you have rolled your eyes, or what advice would you have given Khoi to motivate him?
I look at the motivational stuff out there today, and some of them are just like, I don't want to be like disparaging, but like sometimes it's just fluff. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you know, never give up, this and that. Sure, those are like good principles, but like, how do you really apply that to like your own life, you know? And if I were to talk to myself, I know how stubborn I am sometimes. If I were to talk to myself at that time, I'd probably, roll my eyes and be like, you know, whatever. I'm not thinking about like tech. I'm not thinking about my job. You know, I'm just thinking about like, okay, what's the cool shoe, that I want to want to buy if I could save up money, and things that, a junior high school kid would think about. Like saying, hey, there's a world of opportunity out there is not as powerful or as useful as if I were to just like kind of demonstrate it. Role models are important. I don't know. I feel like setting up the environment for, hey, you know what? That's okay that I didn't make it this time. Letting people know that it's not a big deal to try. I think the other thing is people feel there's so much permanence, like, oh, if I do this, everybody's going to see me and they're going to see that I failed, and they hold themselves back because of that.
I love that. I hadn't heard somebody actually articulate that, but you just said there's no permanence. And I think just drilling that into kids' heads that everything that you're going through is temporary. Even trying these things out. And hey, maybe you'll want to try that much longer. You'll want to keep doing that later. You'll like it. But I think making it okay for it not to be, this is what it's going to be for the rest of your life.
Your goal is to really kind of expose this to people and let people know that there are things out there, and the way that you're going about it is you are kind of creating these things, and you're having this dialogue that people can hear. The way that you're going about this, you want to set up an environment for like these young kids to find resources that you can, provide them. I really admire you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Khoi. I mean, I'm really trying to put, the younger Khoi and the younger Martha, we're in class together. If somebody were to come to a classroom and try to motivate us to do something, how would we listen? What would resonate with us? And then the other side of it is, showing the people who are actually educating us, who maybe will hire us later, to consider how we're brought up. I have to tell you, we're not much different.
We're both, got some rebel blood in us, and
we do.
A little bit of a troublemaker.
That's okay.
Yeah, totally fine.
Those kids sometimes get the short end of the stick because people don't understand them and are not patient with them. When reality is, all these kids needed was somebody to say, chill out. Take it easy. It's okay. Maybe channel that energy into something else. I channeled it into marketing, because that is, we'll figure out how to sell. We'll figure out how to put program. Like, I'm always changing. There's always new ideas. Like I said, I'm a little bit self-diagnosed ADD. So I like to do multiple stuff all the time. And that is what energizes me. But had I not been put in the right environment, like you said, Khoi, somebody would have said, this girl crazy.
Yeah. And once you're in that environment, next thing you know, you excel. It's like, hey, this is what I was kind of meant for. If we were sitting in class together, somebody that came in that was of like our ethnicity or that had a background like ours, we would be able to identify with a lot better than somebody that just came in that wasn't of that. Hey man, I can't believe this guy did this, or this woman did this, and they were in trouble as a youth, and they turned out fine. And that showing them that does show them that possibility. Like, bringing it back to that idea of like, seeing the table of contents, seeing what's possible, kind of having people share their stories, and then you broadcasting this and showing it.
Well, we're showing him the table of contents, Khoi.
They're seeing the stuff that has happened, right? Like they're seeing people that have gone through it, and then they could build their own version of that story because they know it's possible. They saw the steps to do it. And if they wanted to zoom in on any particular person's life or information, they could say, oh, this is what they did to get there. These are the things that I could do, and I could alter that to fit with my current life.
Educators that want the Marthas and the Khoi backgrounds at their schools because they have kids like us need to be okay with reaching out and zooming in and saying, hey, tell me more about that, because I have kids like you that I need to, I need to help. Like you said, they need to zoom into us, and we need to be okay with saying, yes, I'm here for you to zoom in on me so that you can get motivated. Because I think sometimes we get so busy that we don't have time, and reality is we need to make time. We can't get to everybody person to person, but hopefully digital touch to digital touch, and this is where you're going to help out Khoi the world, we're going to make a difference.
The whole thing about letting people zoom in, that's totally perfect. That other part of it that you just mentioned about like putting it out there. Sometimes people don't know it's available. If their life is so busy and they don't hear the message, sometimes broadcasting it is what they need. It's that light, that they're seeing, or that
the light. And we're back to the light.
Right. It's a beacon or something that they can reach out to, and then they could go toward it.
I just love that metaphor, because I think in every immigrant story, there's a light. We should not be embarrassed of our stories. Your parents' generation, mine, not that they were embarrassed. I think they just thought that we're moving forward. We're moving forward. We don't have to look back at where we come from. And, you know, we don't tell our kids like all those details, like the boats and, you know, the jumping into a car and the light and, you know, that we didn't have food. Like that is so important for kids, you know, and the kids and people who just want to get to know other cultures, to know, wow, this is crazy. When I talked about my immigrant story at Adobe, people are like, what? You guys go through what? Yeah, because people don't talk about it because they've moved, they just don't, they want to forget it.
Right. Yeah.
We can't forget it. We're history. We can't forget it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about like, you know, being embarrassed, I mean, I think at a younger age, it's a lot more critical. Like, oh, well, my peers are seeing this, or, you know, I don't want them to know that my family doesn't have a lot of money. Being younger, it's very hard to tell a younger person to say, you know what, don't worry about that, because up until now, like their life, you know, of like, you know, 15 years or whatever it is and how long that is, during that age, 1 year is like a significant portion of their life.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas when they're older, like when we're older, 1 year is becomes smaller and smaller part of our life. So they start being less critical. You can never tell somebody that, you know, like they can't really see it until they're there.
Yeah. And again, there's no permanence. Nothing is permanent. Everything changes. Even as adults, Khoi, nothing is permanent. I mean, if I were to look at last year, completely different than this year, I'm sure you were doing different things. And it's just drilling that into everybody. There's no permanence, and it's okay to keep trying different things, and it's okay to come from harsh backgrounds, and it's okay to be stubborn. We're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. We can be all right because there's a table of contents that says you're going to be all right.
Pick that story. Pick that part of the story.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Khoi, we got to drop. Is there anything that you want to say that maybe I didn't ask you? And I could probably talk to you for hours, but anything you want to say here?
You know, again, I want to commend you for the things that you're doing here and the things that you're like really working toward. It's like an embodiment of like what we talked about. We talk about these things and they're all concepts, but you know, the things that you're doing with these podcasts and just the stuff that you want to do, that's what we need. Full support of you for doing all this stuff and full of admiration as well.
Listen, peace, love, and thank you so much for your story. Friends, I don't know about you, but after listening, I've come to the conclusion that whether we're from Vietnam, Mexico, or some other place, hope unites us. What we thought were shameful, embarrassing things are actually quite a superpower. If we own it, let's own it. Khoi Lee, thank you for speaking to me. And to anyone listening thinking there is no hope, always look for the light. This is Moments with Martha. Make sure you subscribe. Peace and love, everybody. Adios.